Namaskaram, friends. Om Namah Shivaya. Let's start with some prayer. Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat, Parabrahmam, Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Gurave Sarva Loganam, Vishaje Bhavroginam, Nitaye Sarva Vidhyanam, Sri Dakshina Murtaye Namaha. Jnānānandamayam Devam Nirmala Spatika Kridam Ādhāram Sarva Vidhyanam Sayagriva Upasmahe. सरस्वती नमस्तुभ्यं वरदे कामरूपिणी विद्यारंभं करिष्यामि सिद्धिभवतु मे सदा पद्मपत्र विशालाक्षि पद्मकेसरी वर्धिनी नित्यं पद्मालयाम् आयुள் देहि धनं देहि विद्यां देहि महेश्वरी திருப்பிரகாசவலலா திவ்ய திருவடிகளே சரணம் வள்ளல் மலரடி வாழ்க வாழ்க எல்லா உயிர்களும் இன்புற்று வாழ்க அருட்பெரும் ஜோதி அருட்பெரும் ஜோதி தனிப்பெரும் கருணை அருட்பெரும் ஜோதி Hari Om. Good morning, friends. So we will continue with the discussion on sāṃkhya. So we have covered some sessions. So we will continue with that. So let me share my screen. I hope you are able to see the screen. So we are in the process of deep diving into Sāṃkhya philosophy, so which is one of the oldest philosophies globally, and which rooted from India. So before moving on, let us continue the prayers. சிவன் அவன் என் சிந்தையில் நின்ற அதனால் அவன் அருளாலே அவன்தாள் வணங்கி சிந்தை மகிழ சிவபுராணம் தன்னை முந்தை வினை முழுதும் ஓய உரைப்பேன் யான். அசதோமா சத்யமய தமசோமா ஜோதிர்கமய மிருத்யோர்மா அமிர்தங்கமய. ஓம் சாந்தி சாந்தி சாந்தி. ஸ்ரீ குருவ்யோ நமஹ. So this is the overall agenda of the coverage that I am planning to do on Sāṃkhya. So we have already covered topics between 3.1 to 3.6. So the last session that we had started with 3.4. So we are now moving on to 3.7. Okay. The other topics we will be covering as part of the subsequent sessions. So just a recap of what all we covered. So we started discussing in general about the religion, what is religion and what are the different ways of classifying religions in the world, what are the popular religions in practice, both from the Indian context as well as from the global context, and what are the different faiths within within Hinduism, etc. Then we moved from a religious perspective to a more deep dive into the scriptural aspect of religion. So the religion, every religion or every mainstream religion at least has huge corpus of their own scriptures, which are sometimes many religions consider certain part of the scriptures as direct revelation. Okay, so or the Vedic Shrutis or the Agamas or the Christian or the Islamic. So they can, every religion has their own set of scriptures. We had a deep dive session on these scriptures. So this is the video on that. Okay. And next we moved on to the philosophical side. So we started with what is religion, and then we moved on to what are the different ways of classifying scriptures according to those religions. And then we moved on to the topic of philosophy in perspective. So again, we started with the generic concepts of what is philosophy, what are the different branches of the philosophy, how do we classify philosophy based on the Occidental and the Oriental schools, etc. Okay, and then we identified the different mind maps and historiographical timeline of the philosophical evolution. So this is the video on that, and the links are provided there. Okay. Then we moved on to the specifics of Indian philosophies. So the infographic map of the Indian philosophy deep dive, and then the stages of philosophical development and the Vedic philosophies, and the astika darshanas, the sixfold Vedic śāstradarśīkas, etc. So we started deep diving into the Indian philosophies. So this is the video for that, and the link is provided here. Then we moved on to the actual topic, which is the sāṃkhya darśana. So we started first with sāṃkhya darśana. So among the various darshanas of Indian philosophy, which we will deep dive in future sessions, we started with sāṃkhya because it is one of the oldest recorded formalized philosophies probably in the world. So we started with that. We started with the Guru Parampara of the Sāṃkhya Darshana, and then we also looked at a historical aspect of its chronology, and then we try to analyze the various treatises or the scriptural corpus for Sāṃkhya, specifically to Sāṃkhya, and how the Sāṃkhya philosophy has its references right from the Vedas to the specific Prakarana Granthas within the Sāṃkhya Darshana. So this is the video, or YouTube video on that. Okay, so and then we moved on to the last session where we started understanding the nomenclature of the Sāṃkhya concepts and terms. So we started with understanding etymology of the term Sāṃkhya. So how it has two or three main connotations. So as an enumeration and as a intellectual deliberation, etc. Okay, and then we talked about the Purusha Lakshanam. So Purusha and Prakriti are the two major ontological categorizations within the Sāṃkhya Darshana. So we understood the nomenclatures and the basic characteristics of these two tattvas, the Purusha Lakshanam, and we also moved on to the Prakriti Lakshanam. So the video for that is again here. So with all these previous videos, we now step on to the next topic within the Sāṃkhya Darshana, where we are trying to cover the topic of unbounded wedlock as the ontological dualism. So we saw that Sāṃkhya advocates an ontological dualism, where there is Purusha, the spirit, and there is Prakriti, which is called matter or nature or with various alternative names. So we saw that these are the two major ontological entities. Okay. Now we are going to see how these ontological entities are related to each other. So we can call it as an unbound wedlock, and I'll why we call it as a wedlock and why we call it as an unbound, qualified with the adjective as unbound wedlock, we will see as we go through the subsequent sections. Okay, so the focus of this session is on the unbound wedlock as ontological dualism in Sāṃkhya Darshana. So as we see that there are two major ontological entities, we see how we'll see how the dualistic ontology is categorized within the Sāṃkhya philosophy under different characteristics or parameters. Okay, so from a fundamental nature, there is on the left side is the Purusha Tattva, which is the soul principle, and then there is the Prakriti principle. Okay, so just as I mean, when we say soul principle and the Prakriti principle, or Purusha Tattva and Prakriti principle, these itself has two levels of their presence defined across the different scriptures within Sāṃkhya. We have the uh, uh, Ishvaravada and the Nireshvaravada. So, where there is a Mahapurusha Tattva and the Purusha Tattva. Similarly, there is a Mula Prakriti and a Prakriti aspect of it. Okay, so we will deep dive in the subsequent sessions on that. But now we will focus on the major attributes associated with these two major tattvas. So the fundamental nature of the Purusha is he is a pure witness consciousness. So he is a Sakshi Chaitanya. So it means that he doesn't actively participate in the phenomenal or the empirical activities of the phenomenal world. So unlike that, we have the primordial unconscious matter, which is the Mula Prakriti, and the which evolutes into the 24 principles where the actual activities take place. Okay, so but these activities are how these activities are initiated and how for an activity to be initiated, there should be consciousness. But Purusha, while Purusha is conscious, it is supposed to be a passive witness. The Prakriti is supposed to be dynamic, but it is unconscious. So how the marriage happens is what we will understand as we go along. Okay, so then we have the qualities as a parameter, where nirgunatva is what qualifies or the Purusha Tattva. That means it is not bound by qualities. It transcends all the qualities, where the Prakriti is bound by or three categories of qualities, the three gunas, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. Okay, what exactly they mean and is something we will deep dive when we get along. As of now, they are called as the three qualities uh, which manage the entire activities of the Prakriti Tattva. Okay, then from an avastha perspective or a state point of view, so it is inactive, as we already said, the Purusha Tattva, and the Prakriti Tattva is an active principle. Okay, then the quantity from a numeric perspective in Sāṃkhya, the classical Sāṃkhya philosophy, the Purushas are multiple. So there is Aneka Purushavada or Aneka Jivavada is the doctrine within the Sāṃkhya darśana. But there is a ekatva or singularity when it comes to the Prakriti. That means there is only one form of energy or one form of um, energy field or whatever it is, and we will deep dive on what all these terms mean. Uh, but there are multiple souls or multiple spirits according to Sāṃkhya darśana. Then comes to experience. So experience point of view, the Purusha is the knower, observer, or the experiencer. So um, here the Purusha, the Prakriti is experienced. When we say so I mean we need to we need to carefully understand the concept of experiencer as per Sāṃkhya darśana. So while it is Sakshi Chaitanya, what is experience is as an observer. Experience is from an observer point of view, and how that perpetuates into the baddha avastha or the bound stages of a jivatman as a reflection is what we will be covering in subsequent sessions. Okay. Then when it comes to causality, sorry, there's a typo there. When we're talking about the karanatvam or the causality there, it is a transcending causality. So Purusha is considered as a transcending causality, and this Prakriti is bound by that cause and effect. When we say again, this is again, we need to have a disclaimer when I say it is a transcending causality. So Purusha is not a direct cause, but it is observation triggers a cause as part of a reflection within the buddhi, buddhi tattva, or the antakarana, the mahat tattva. So we will deep dive the subtle difference between it. While Purusha is akaranatva, it still is the Mula Karana for triggering the activities in Mula Prakriti. So when we get into the intricacies of that, we will be able to appreciate what we mean by saying that it is a passive principle, the Purusha, and observer Sakshi Chaitanya, yet it governs the activities from a Ishvara point of view. So it is a transcending causality. That's what I would like to call it. Okay. Then the final point I wanted to highlight is the Purusha is an independent principle. It is not dependent on Prakriti because it is a Sarvagnya. That means it is omniscient by itself, and Purusha on the Prakriti on the other hand needs the reflection of the consciousness of the Prakriti. So in that sense, it is a dependent principle. But how all these things, when it gets into a wedlock, how there is a mutual handshake there, which is again unbound, is what we will be covering. So just a recap of our earlier session, where while we discussing about the Purusha Prakriti Lakshanam, particularly the Prakriti Lakshanam, we highlighted the verses from the Devi Bhagavata Purana, where the Purusha Prakriti concept as Prakriti as the energy principle, so the potency principle is very beautifully highlighted. So all our discussion will be based on a similar concept. Okay, as we already discussed this in the earlier session, I'm not reading the verses here. Okay. Again, to set the context, the Purusha Prakriti Sambandha, okay, which is the crux of the Sāṃkhya duality. So there are two entities. One is considered dependent, one is considered independent, one is considered insentient, other is considered sentient, one is considered singular, other is considered multiple. But how the both together constitute our phenomenal or the empirical experiences is what we will be studying. Okay, so this is also one of the reasons why Prakriti Tattva is symbolized as Nari Tattva, female. So the very term Prakriti, as we saw in the last session also, is even by grammar denoted to a female principle, and that female principle is theologized as as the Parashakti, the Mahashakti, the Mahakali, or the Mahalakshmi. So is theologized as the highest divine feminine form. Okay, so in fact, according to the school, Mula Prakriti in a passive conjunction relationship with its polar parity, the Purusha Tattva, is considered to be the primary cause of all phenomenal manifestations. So the Purusha Prakriti Sambandha, okay, so which we can call it as the Shiva Shakti Sammelana or the Lakshmi Narayana Sammelana, is the cause for the entire manifestation. Okay, so while Purusha is a transcendent principle, the transcendent Shakti, the Prakasha, uh, Prakriti is a Vimarsha Shakti, so which is responsible for all the manifestations. So together they govern the entire manifestation of the universe. Okay, and this is precisely why the two are variously theologized as divine parents of the universe. Okay, so they are considered as the divine parents, the father and the mother. So both from the Vedic and as well as the Siddhanta, the Puranas, and the various other branches of Hindu scriptures. Okay, so this is on the right side. We have the tabulation of how these the polarity between Purusha and Prakriti is symbolized and theologized across various scriptures. Okay, so then, for example, the Vedas, we have the heaven and the earth. Uh, so the and then we have the Daksha and the Aditi symbology, and then we have the uh, Pururavas and the Prithvi or the Uruvasi, the Urvasi, and then we have the rain and the earth symbology, Parjanya and the Prithvi, and then the Purusha was considered as the Viraj, the Purusha and the Viraj relationship. Okay, and then we have the Satyam and the rhythm relationship, the being or the existence and the order cosmos relationship. So these are mostly the Vedic symbolism or the Vedic glorification eulogies. When I say symbolic, again, you should not consider that it is a mere symbol. Okay, so in Indian philosophy, Indian spirituality, a symbol is as good as the original, because particularly from the microcosmic and the macrocosmic correspondence law. So what is there? The symbol is not just a symbol. So it is not just a map and the actual territory difference. So the map is a fractal representation of the territory. So that is how whenever we use the word symbol, prakriti or pratima, it is actually the archavadara of the same divinity principle. So when I use the term symbol, we should not consider from a westernized lens perspective. Okay. Then from the Puranic, we have Shiva and Shakti. Shiva as a male principle, as a Purusha, and Shakti as a female principle. Okay. So we have Maheshwari, Maheshwara, Parameshwari, Parameshwara, and then Shiva and Parvati, Narayana and Narayani. We have Narayana and Lakshmi. We have Hayagriva and Lakshmi. We have Prakasha and Vimarsha in the Kashmiri Saivism. And we have the Paranada and Parabindu concepts in the Nadanta school. So we have the Vedanta, Siddhanta, Kalanta, Yoganta, Bhoganta kind of darshanas. So each of them have their own versions of this polarity. And then we have Artha and Shabda. So we know Kalidasa's the famous sloka on that. The next important deep dive we will be having is on some of these examples that we, or symbolisms that we talked about from the scriptures. So the Rig Veda, for example, the 10th mandala talks about The earth was born from the upward growing tree. The quarters were born from the earth. Dakshas was born from Aditi, and afterwards Aditi from Daksha. Okay, so this provides the yin and yang kind of a relationship. One of the earliest references of how there is a mutual contribution between the Shiva Shakti principles or between the Purusha Prakriti principles, where one evolves from the other and other again uh, interacts with the former. So this is what is referred in the Rig Veda. Okay. So Sayana Bhasha for that, Sayanacharya in his Bhashya for the same provides this explanation. It may be objected that there is a contradiction here, since a self-practiced effect cannot be the cause of itself. The Venerable Yaska, removing the objection, has questioned and refuted the inconsistency. So he is referring to Nirukta, which is one of the oldest etymological treatises. It is one of the Vedangas of among the Vedas. It is one of the Angas. So where he quotes Yaskacharya's Nirukta, where it says that it may be objected, how can it be that Daksha was born from Aditi and afterwards Aditi from Daksha? The answer is either they were born together or by a divine law they reciprocally give birth to each other and share each other's nature. Okay, so this is a very, very, very important concept that we need to understand, particularly in the light of some mischievous Western critics who try to give a very corrupt or blasphemous interpretation to these concepts. So these are very, very, very philosophical concepts where there is a derivation between matter to energy or energy to matter or from wave to particle or from particle to wave. This symbiosis between the polarities or see these polarities, though they are like North Pole and South Pole are at the two different edges, they always are related to each other in one form where one contributes to the other and the other contributes to the one. So this is what is highlighted here. We will deep dive on this concept of how Aditi was born from Daksha and Daksha again was born from Aditi. I mean, this reciprocal relationship, what it means as a very, very, very deep, multi-layered meanings. We will cover it in due course appropriately when we get there. Okay. So again, this is another mantra from the Rig Veda, which is the famous and almost daily chanted Purusha Sukta. Okay, where it says from him was born Virat, and from Virat Purusha, he as soon as was born became manifested and afterwards created the earth and then the corporeal forms. So here it provides a sequence of the cosmological evolution, one of the earliest references of cosmological evolution, from how the from the divine source the Virat Purusha was born, and from how from there the various other phenomenal evolutes evolved. Okay. Again, Sayana Bhashya for that. From that, the Lord in the form of creation, Virat, was born. Afterwards, this, then, before. Thus was what was said. He strode widely. That very statement is set forth in detail. From that primordial person, Adi Purusha, Virat was born. The cosmic body arose. It is Virat because various entities shine here. As far over Virat having made as the basis of Adhikarana, just that body situated above the body of Virat, a certain man, the one who identifies with that body, Abhimani, namely the person Purusha, was born. Okay, I'm just used jnana for this translation because I'm not I do not have enough scholarship to translate it, and I couldn't find within the time span a good translation uh, from a subject matter expert. Moving on, we come to the actual Prakarana Grantha from Sāṃkhya, where we will look at the Sāṃkhya Pravachana Sutra, mm, which is attributed to Sri Kapila Maharishi. Although some say it's older to the Sāṃkhya Karika. So here the Sāṃkhya Pravachana Sutra declares this, and since the character of creator belongs really to nature, it follows that it is fictionally attributed to the soul. So what it provides is something like the Vivartavāda of the Vedantic interpretation. At least that's how J. Ballantyne translates this. Okay, and then the Sāṃkhya Pravachana Sutra Bhashya, which is a commentary on the above sutra by a great polymath again, as I said in the last session. Jñāna Bhikshu provides an integration, a very holistic integration between three major philosophical branches, which is the Sāṃkhya darśana, the Yoga darśana, which are more of a polarity principle, which have been always together. He integrates these two philosophies with the Kevaladvaita Uttamimamsa Vedanta of Adi Shankaracharya, and he provides his own unique interpretations of a concept of double reflection, etc. We will deep dive when we get there, but I just wanted to highlight this specific commentary on the sutra. And since nature's character of creator is decided to be real, there is really in the scriptures only a fictitious or figuratively attribution of creativeness of soul. Okay, so this again corresponds to whatever we have been discussing. The Purusha is supposed to be Sakshi Chaitanya. It is awareness or consciousness only or observer only principle, but its reflection is what is manifested as all the fivefold activities of creation, sustenance, and then destruction, etc. We will talk about what is these fivefold activities, Panchamaha Kriya. So we'll look at it, but all these things are according to the Sāṃkhya darśana and also according to Vedanta is basically it is a vivarta relationship. That means it is a apparent relationship or a virtual control of the activities. So the Purusha doesn't directly perform the activities, is what is highlighted here. Now let us look at one of the contemporaries and one of the greatest thinkers, again a polymath, Sri Aurobindo, a great nationalist, a statesman, a yogi, a jñāni, etc. So here we can refer to one of his magnum opus works, Life Divine. Savitri and Life Divine are, he has written a lot of works. So among these two, these are considered to be his magnum opus. You see, Life Divine is more of a prose work. Savitri is more of a poetic work. Okay, so here we'll start with the Life Divine when he talks about the incarnate word. Okay, so there is also interesting concept of Shabdadvaita. Bridahari and in his Vakyapadiya talks about Shabdadvaita. Okay, we'll talk about it when we get there. but the incarnate word, the logos or the Brahman or the Vak or the Omkara or the Pranava is considered as Brahman. Okay, so we'll discuss about what is that word there when we talk about the logos, etc. Now, coming back to the Sāṃkhya reference, in the philosophy of Sāṃkhya, we find developed most thoroughly the metaphysical idea of Purusha Prakriti. These two are eternally separate entities, both in relation to each other. Prakriti is nature power and, and an executive power. Its energy apart from consciousness. It is energy apart from consciousness. From consciousness belongs to the Purusha. For consciousness belongs to the Purusha. Prakriti without Purusha is inert, mechanical, inconscient. Prakriti develops as its formal self and basis of formal primal matter, and in it manifests life and a sense and mind and intelligence. So here he is reiterating whatever we have been discussing. So there are two major ontological entities, Purusha and Prakriti. The Purusha is the sentient or the conscious principle, which is the Sakshi Chaitanya. Then we have the Prakriti, which is the executive power, which is the Shakti. That is why it is called as a Shakti, the energy. Okay, but it is devoid of consciousness, and the marriage between Purusha and Prakriti is the cause for the manifestation. But this marriage is, again, as I keep saying, it is an unbound marriage. Okay, so the Prakriti develops as its formal self and the basis of actions of primal matter. Okay, and in its manifests life and sense and mind and intelligence. The various tattvas, the 24 tattvas, starting with the antakarana. So is what is highlighted here. But yeah, out of this, the intelligence or the buddhi or the mahat tattva is the grand reflector of the Purusha Tattva into the Prakriti fold. Okay, but intelligence too, since it's part of nature, so it is part of Prakriti. Nature here means Prakriti, and intelligence is the Buddhi Tattva. But intelligence too, since it is part of nature and its products in primal matter, that is Moola Prakriti, is also inert, mechanical, inconscient. So the main thing is that this is a very, very, very important concept that we need to understand in comparison with Western world or the Western philosophy, the Western idealism or the German philosophy, or as well as from the Greek philosophy to the Western philosophy, even to modern neuroscience or the domain of artificial intelligence, where the concept of consciousness is gaining a lot of importance again. Unlike there where there is where buddhi or the intellect or the which is organed within the brain is considered to be a conscious entity. Here in Sāṃkhya Tattva, the Veda and it particularly, and all those other darshanas which adapted the Sāṃkhya Tattva, here buddhi, manas, the antakarana, so buddhi, manas, ahangaram, and in some schools they call it as the chitta, the four principles are also material principles. They are by nature inconscient, so they are not conscious. Okay, so intelligence is basically a reflection of consciousness of the soul. Okay, unfortunately modern physics or modern AI hasn't identified or hasn't recognized or dealt with the concept of consciousness into such an extent to identify there is a spirit, and it all that it does is only an emergent philosophy from matter. Matter tries to emerge intelligence from matter, but this emerged intelligence is basically a reflection. We call it as pratibimba, or an appearance of the underlying consciousness principle, which is the Purusha Tattva. Okay, so this is what is highlighted by Sri Aurobindo. Okay, but intelligence too, since it's part of nature and its product in primal matter, is also inert, mechanical, inconscient. a conception which sheds a certain light on the order and perfectly related workings of the inconscient in the material universe. So this again is a very, very important context, particularly today's uh, um, scientific research or technological advancements towards um, from Gen AI to AGI, artificial general intelligence, and even towards its advanced form of intelligence, so which is called as the super intelligence or super artificial intelligence. So we need to where today modern science is only taking a bottom up approach how matter emerges consciousness or generates intelligence, the so called Gen AI. Okay, is very different from the ancient wisdom where there is the missing link of consciousness which is not identified yet in modern science. Okay, so when we talk about mind uploading, we talk about transhuman singularity as a roadmap for artificial intelligence. So there the mind is uploaded with a reflected consciousness of the soul, of the spirit. So the digital twin that we are talking about, all these concepts based on the roots of ancient wisdom, particularly if you reflect it in terms of the sāṃkhya darśana, as Sri Aurobindo highlights. Intelligence is inert, is inconscient, but it is activated through the spirit, the light of the soul. Okay, the spirit that is imparted to the mechanical workings of the sense, mind, and intelligence. They become conscious by its consciousness, even as they become active only by the assent of the spirit. The Purusha becomes free by drawing back from Prakriti. It becomes master of her by refusing to be involved in matter. So this is the transcendent nature of the Purusha Tattva of divinity. So we talk about two natures of divinity. One is the transcendent nature, so which means it transcends. So which is the Paratva, which transcends, and then there is the immanent principle. So where it inheres or it pervades, all pervasive principle. We already talked about the etymologies of Atman. We also talked about the etymology of Purusha, etc., where the pervasion principle. So the all pervasive, the omnipresence of divinity is there. So in Tamil, there are two very important terms to denote it. So the Kadavul talks about the transcendent pervasion. So it talks about both the kada means the transcendent nature, ul means that which inheres into everything. So it is both a transcendent principle and as well as the inherent principle. So Iraivan again means the Ishvara Tattva who's actually the immanent principle who governs the entire fivefold acts of governance in the manifest world, the entire cycle. Okay, so this is and there is one more important term in the ancient Tamil called as Iyavul, which is the Shakti Tattva, which actually Iyavul means that which that would what to say, that would governs or that would executes. So இயக்கத்தை நடத்துவது. So இயவுள் is one of the very ancient references in from Tolkapiam days on for God. So we have the transcendent and immanent principle by the denoted by the term Kadavul, and then we have Iraivan. So the immanent principle, immanent governor or the Lord or Ishvara, and then we have the Yavul, who's the like the chief executing officer, the CEO of an organization, right? So these are all the three major terms. Similarly, we in the Pancharatra Agamas talk about the different avatars, wherein we have the Paravadara, which is the transcendent principle, and then we have the Antaryami Avadara, which is the inherent principle in all the so which is the uh, which is what resides inside all manifestations, the underlying reality, the substrata of all reality. And similarly, um, in the even within the symbols that we talked about, like the vigraha in a temple is not just a stone, or the pratima or pratika image is just not an image, but it is actually inherent divinity, the archa avadara of divinity. So this is what is highlighted here. The Purusha becomes free by drawing back from the Prakriti. It becomes master of her by refusing to be involved in matter. So it is transcendent, at the same time it is immanent. So it governs the entire process, but it is not impacted or affected by it. That is what it means here. Refusing to be involved in matter. Nature acts by the three principal modes of quality of its stuff. So that is the sattva, rajas, and tamogunas, and its actions, which in us become the fundamental modes of our psychological and physical substance and its workings. The principle of inertia, the principle of kinesis, and the principle of balance. So the sattva, rajas, and tamas is what it says. The principle of inertia is the tamoguna. The principle of kinesis is the rajoguna, and the principle of balance is the sattva guna. So all these three gunas or principles or qualities. Again, the word guna here has a very specific meaning in Sāṃkhya compared to the term guna in a jñāna philosophy. So we will deep dive when we get there. Okay, when we talk about gunas. Okay, so the principle of kinesis and the principle of balance, light and harmony, the three gunas are what is highlighted here. When these are in unequal motion, our action takes place. So this is called a symmetry breaking in modern cosmology. So we talk about the initial state and the symmetry breaking. The symmetry breaking is what is the cause of the Big Bang, according to the Big Bang cosmology. So everything was initially into a zero-dimensional singularity of all kinds of matter, all kinds of energy were compressed into a dense dimensional energy which doesn't have occupy space or time, and then there was a big bang. Okay, so that big bang is actually breaking of this symmetry. So that is what is highlighted here. So the three gunas are originally in a state of symmetry, and that symmetry breaking is the cause for all the varieties of manifestations that we see here. Okay, so when there is an unequal motion or action takes place, when they fall into equilibrium, again when it goes back to equilibrium. So he is talking about the evolution and in the involution process in the cosmology. So evolution is symmetry breaking, and then involution is going back to the symmetry. When they fall into the equilibrium, she passes into quiescence. Purusha conscious being is plural, not one and single. So this we saw that. So he talks about aneka purushavada, while nature is one. So this also we talked about, and it would seem to follow that whatever principle of oneness we find in the existence belongs to nature. Okay, so it seems. So Marcus' words. So where he tries to say is that it would seem to follow that whatever principle of oneness we find in existence belongs to, when we say existence, when we talk about the empirical or the phenomenal existence, belongs to nature, but each soul is independent and unique. Okay, soul to itself. So that means it is unique to itself and separate, whether in its enjoyment of nature or its liberation from nature. So what it again talks about the aneka jiva vada or aneka purusha vada, where the liberation of one does not liberate the entire world. So if Adi Shankara attained mukti, or Sri Aurobindo attained mukti, or Madhvacharya attained mukti, I am still a Baddhatman. Okay, we are differentiated through space and time. So Adi Shankara was 2000 years back, Ramanuja was 1000 years back, and Madhvacharya 500 or 600 years back. Okay, each and Aurobindo is more a contemporary, probably a century back. Okay, well, I mean less than a century back. Okay, so they each soul is differentiated in space time, and one's action is independent to him. Okay, be it liberation or his bondage is independent to him. So this is how Sāṃkhya sees it. Okay, all we are talking about is the Sāṃkhya philosophy. So unique in soul to itself and separate whether in its enjoyment of nature or its liberation from nature. All these positions of the Sāṃkhya we find to be perfectly valid in experience when we come into direct inner contact with the realities of individual soul and universal nature. But they are pragmatic truths, and we are not bound to accept them as the whole or the fundamental truth either of self or of nature. So this is again a very important talk. When we talk about duality, so the Purusha and the Prakriti, and wherein there is Aneka Purusha and the Eka Prakriti, and one's activity does not, or one's liberation does not liberate others, or one's bondage does not bound the other. All these are true from the empirical point of view, which in Vedanta we call it as the Vyavaharika Satya, or Vyavaharika Satya is the empirical truth, or the conventional truth. So when we say Satya, it is also Sattva. So epistemology and ontology are very closely related. So it is also whatever is truth is also an ontological reality. So that means it has ontological context to it. But when you say ontological, the ontology and the context in which I am talking is not the ontology which is just bound to physical ontology. So ontology transcends the physical aspect. So the physicality, for example, consciousness, if you talk about, or if you talk about love, or if you talk about, all these things also exist. So but when you say exist, it is not as physical as a chair. So it is not reduced to a bhuta tattva, the panchabhuta tattvas, right? So that is what we talk about when we talk about the ontology of abstract principles. Okay, we'll deep dive on these concepts later, but all I wanted to highlight here is this: all these positions, according to Sri Aurobindo, all these positions of Sāṃkhya we find to be perfectly valid in experience. That means it is experientially verifiable. Okay, that is why it is empirical. When we come into direct inner contact with the realities of the individual soul and universal nature, so based on our day-to-day activities, we can empirically verify this. Okay, but again it comes with a conditional clause here. So this is empirically verified, but beyond this empirical layer, beyond this phenomenal layer, there is a nominal reality, which is called as the paramarthika satya, the paramarthika sattva, the paramarthikal realm, or the paramarthika, the transcendent realm, or the transcendent truth. Okay, so but they are pragmatic truths. That means they are empirically real, and we are not bound to accept them as a whole or the fundamental truth either of self or nature. So the relationship between Purusha and Prakriti, of we talked about from a dualistic point of view, works very fine empirically. That means it is validated empirically. In fact, the entire gamut of modern science is based on these empirical verification. So the entire science of falsification, verifiability, principles of science is based on this logic of how I can verify this, I can prove it, I can experimentally prove all this. So all this phenomenal reality as a empirical aspect, the Vyavaharika Sattva. So in Vedanta we categorize into three major realms of Satya, truth, or Sattva, the reality or the ontological or the epistemological aspects. Okay, one is the Vyavaharika Satya, which is the conventional truth or the correspondence truth, or the empirical truth, which through our senses we can empirically experience it. Okay, so and we can verify it, we can communicate it between each other. So that is the Vyavaharika truth. And then there is the pratibhashika truth, which is also a truth, which is also considered as satya, which is also considered as a sattva, but it is not empirical. It is considered categorized under the imaginary real or the kalpa satya, okay, and which is phenomenally real. So there is a slight difference between an empirical truth and the phenomenal truth. Empirical truth are empirically verifiable through our senses, okay, through all these scientific measures. Then there is a phenomenal truth where we cannot empirically verify. So there is no pratyaksha anubhava through the senses, but there is a anumana, the inferential references we can make, but both are experiential. That means I can experience some of them either in a dream. So the experience part of it is there, but it is not empirical. It is a phenomenal experience. Beyond these three is the transcendent principle, the paramarthika satya, the paramarthika sattva, which is in which the highest form of the non-dualistic dualistic experience or the singularity is again experienceable as testified by the Jivan Muktas. Okay. Prakriti presents itself as an inconsistent energy, inconscient energy. Okay, it appears or presents itself as inconscient energy. So this is again a very important term we already discussed. So here divinity or omniscience pervades even Prakriti, but it conceals itself. So the Avarana Shakti conceals itself. So we also talked about how Roger Penrose talks about the cosmic censorship. That is what is highlighted here. Prakriti presents itself. That means it is a self. It is an independent way of concealing, concealing itself. Okay, so or self-abstraction or self-encapsulation. Prakriti presents itself as an inconscient energy in the material world, but as the scale of consciousness rises, so as our consciousness rises, she reveals herself more and more as a conscious force, and we perceive that even her inconscience concealed a secret consciousness. So this is a very, very important point where Sri Aurobindo tries to decode the Purusha Prakriti balance, the Prakriti, which is the Vimarsha Shakti, and Purusha, which is the Chaitanya Shakti, are always one and the same. They are the two sides of the same coin. We'll discuss more about it. So where there is the hidden side of it is the Prakriti, where consciousness is hidden. It's a censored, it is hidden. Okay, it's a gupta, it is secret. Okay, and then there is the other side, the Purusha Tattva, where it is manifest, it is expressed. So Prakriti presents itself as an inconscient energy in the material world, but as the scale of consciousness rises, she reveals herself more and more as a conscious force, and we perceive that even her inconscience concealed a secret consciousness. So too conscious being in its individual souls, but in itself we can experience it as one in all and all in its own essential existence. So similarly, all the differences between the subject and the object, okay, are all that Beda will vanish when we get into the higher realms of consciousness, where all these merge into a singularity. Moreover, the experience of soul and nature as dual is true, but the experience of the unity has also its validity. So that's what again. So while it appears to be dual, and that dual is real from an empirical perspective, but from a transcendental point of view, its unity is also equally valid. Okay, so while the Dvaita darshanas focus on the duality, the empirical aspect of it, the Advaita darshanas or the Abheda darshanas look at the singularity or the unity aspect of it. So if nature or energy is able to impose its forms and workings on being, It can only be because it is nature or energy of being, and so that being can accept them as its own. If the being can become lord of nature, so the lord of nature, that means the Parameshwara. So the Parameshwara is the lord of nature. If nature, it must be because it is its own nature, which it has passively watched doing its work, but can control and master. Even in its passivity, it's consistent. Its consent is necessary to the action of Prakriti, and this relation shows sufficiently that the two are not alien to each other. The duality is a position taken up, a double status accepted for the operations of the self manifestation of being. But there is no eternal and fundamental separateness and dualism of being and its consciousness, force of the soul and nature. So, this again reiterates that there is duality, but beyond the duality there is a singularity, there is a non-duality. Okay, so this is Sri Aurobindo in his Life Divine, explaining the relationship between Purusha and the Prakriti, um, beyond the classical interpretation of only the duality aspect. Okay, so Sāṃkhya is the mother of all philosophies, in the sense that it is one of the earliest philosophies which gave importance to the ontological building blocks. So to categorize the ontology into two major, Purusha and Prakriti, and the Prakriti into the 24 principles, altogether 25 principles, of which the Purusha is the conscious principle, and um, the Prakriti and its evolution is the material principle. Okay. Now this duality is interpreted in multiple ways in various other Vedanta darshanas and the Agamanta darshanas. That's how whichever, as I said, whichever schools looks at only the duality or projects the duality aspects to its to its disciples or devotees, or to its marga, focuses on the Bhedavada, and those which focuses on the transcendent singularity, focuses on the Abhedavada, the Advaita darshanas. So both in Saiva Siddhanta, I mean, both in Vedanta, we have the Kevala Advaita, the Shuddha Advaita, so the Vishishta Advaita, the Dvaita, and we have the Saiva Siddhanta. In the Agama world, we have the Kashmiri Saivism, the Shiva Advaita. So all these schools have their own interpretations of between Veda and Abheda, and there are bridging these doctrines in terms of the Vedavada. So this is how the Indian philosophies are further, particularly the Hindu philosophies, are basically classified, and Sāṃkhya plays a very important role as one of the original pioneers in formally categorizing. Of course, all these concepts are there in the Vedas, but formally as a philosophical categorization into ontological entities, I think we can trace back to Sāṃkhya for that. Okay. So coming to the theological context, we'll deep dive the theological aspect within Sāṃkhya in subsequent sections. But I just wanted to jumpstart here as we are talking about the polarity principle here. Right from this is how the classical Sāṃkhya merges with the theological Sāṃkhya, okay, and with the other darshanas and margas of Hinduism. So we have the Shaiva aspect, where Shiva corresponds to Purusha and Shakti corresponds to the Prakriti. Okay, so there are both forms of depiction, where there is a form where Ardhanarishwara form in a human form, and then there is Shivalinga form, where there's a Shivalinga, the Linga and the Yoni aspect. Okay, and then there are separately identified as Shiva separately and Shakti separately. This is in the Saivism perspective. So the Mahabharatam Shanti Parvam, for example, talks about Janaka said, "Oh holy, O Holy One, it has been said that the relation between male and female is like that which subsists between the indestructible and the destructible, or Purusha and the Prakriti. Without a male, a female can never conceive. Without a female, a male also can never create form. In consequence of their union with each other, and each depending upon the attributes of the other, form of living creatures are seen to flow. This is the case with all orders of being. Though each other's union for purposes of sexual congress, Maituna, and through each depending upon the attributes of the other forms of living creatures flow in menstrual seasons, I shall tell to thee the indications thereof. So this is basically from Mahabharata Shanti Parva, which is a itihasa, which is the longest itihasa in the world. So here all the philosophies are mentioned in their own different capacities. So here a reference of whatever Sri Aurobindo said in contemporary times can be traced back to the Mahabharata slokas in the Shanti Parva stated above, where I have given examples of Shiva Shakti Tattva. Okay. So the Matsya Purana is again, so we talked about itihasa, like Mahabharata, where it is the wedlock is identified, and then we are talking about Matsya Purana, which is one of the Mahapuranas compiled by Vedavyasa Maharishi. Here, Sruta said, now I shall set forth the supreme Ardhanarishwara. So the Ardhanarishwara Tattva is what is explained here in the Matsya Purana. With one half, there is a beautiful feminine form of the god of gods. On the Isha half, however, there is a section of matted lock, jata, accompanied by the crescent of the young moon. Okay. On the Uma half, also both the hair parting and the forehead mark should be given. So he is basically a geological description of the Ardhanarishwara. So a very powerful iconographical masterpiece. So again, the Matsya Purana continues. Vasuki is on the right. On the left side should prescribe an earring, kundala. So how the feminine aspects and their alangaras and the abharanas are what is highlighted here. I don't want to, read it fully because of, I think we are running short of time. Okay. Again, another great classic is the Amrutanubhava by Sri Jnaneshwara. So this is again a fantastic text. So where it bridges multiple philosophies and theologies. So here he says, I pay obedience to God and Goddess, who are thus unconditioned primordial parents of the universe. So we talked about how Purusha and Prakriti form the parents. So here he glorifies it as a eulogy. The very lover Shiva, impelled by the desire to enjoy himself, assumes a reverse position and becomes the beloved Shakti. How Shiva and Shakti are always two, how the Shiva, how Shakti forked from Shiva. So if you are a Unix programmer in software computer, you will know about the fork and the exec process. So this is the precursor to it. So the very lover Shiva, impelled by the desire to enjoy himself, assumes a reverse position and becomes the beloved Shakti. How he paired himself as Shakti, occupying the same beautiful place, having the same status as Shiva, or sharing the same powers and the same body features. So Shiva and Shakti are not two entities, it is one and the same, but two ways of expressing the same. So again, when you talk about Unix C, the C programming language, there's a concept called union. It is very different from struct. If you talk about a union, in union, I can create 2-3 data members, and I can access one member through the other. That is what is philosophically mentioned here in um, Murtanubhava. In the flush of love, they swallow each other's body. This is again the yin and yang concept of Taoism in China. They, however, emit each other to maintain duality. So this is again a very important concept where Shiva emits Shakti and Shakti swallows Shiva and again re-emits him. Okay, so this is like Aditi born from the this one we talked about, right? So this is what is mentioned as the reciprocal cross-referencing. So uh, even in the concept of self-referential sets in mathematics, we will come across this concept where it is self-referential, it is omnijective, the subject and the object, as David Bohm calls it, right? It is the subject and the object, they get into a principle where one contributes to the other. Okay, in the flush of love, they swallow each other's body. So very beautifully explained as the snake eating itself, or the yin and yang concept. They are neither one as they are not exactly alike, nor they are two as they are not very much different. How can we understand their nature and form? So this again highlights the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle of between wave and particle duality, where it behaves both as a wave and a particle depending upon the way you observe it. Okay, so this, I mean, this wave particle duality of Heisenberg's uncertainty principle can be traced back to Amrita Anubhava, the verses, and of course much earlier. So they are neither one as they are not exactly same. So the wave and particle are not one, because wave is a wave, particle is an instant representation of that. A wave is a field, a particle is a material uh, instance of a particle. So they are not exactly alike. Not they are two. At the same time, they are not two. So wave and a particle are not two. That is what the old quantum physics talks about, right? So, and this is also what is called as the being and the becoming. The being and the becoming are the what is called the wave and the particle, or the nada and the bindu in Kaumara mata. So we call it as nada. Bindu Kaladina Mona Anaginadar Tirpugal, where the nada is the wave, the bindu is the point particle. So nada and the bindu are neither two nor one. Okay, so when you look at it as a wave, the properties of a wave apply to it from certain context. Okay, similarly, if you look at it as a particle, the particle properties can also like the electromagnetic field versus the a photon. Okay, so that is what is highlighted here. So they are neither one as as they are not exactly alike, nor they are two as they are not very much different. How can we understand their nature and form? So this is the uncertainty principle uh, in physics, and it is also the nirvachanya kyati. That means we can never determine why or how this magic happens. How intense is their desire to enjoy themselves? While enjoying, they merge their duality and become one, so much so that even for sheer fun, they do not allow their unity to break. So this again is can be treated the equal to mc squared, where energy and mass are always in a proper equation, where there is always a share. So this energy is mass and mass is energy. The law of conservation of energy and mass, as established in the general theory of relativity, is the E equal to mc squared, is also can be interpreted from these lines, where the Purusha and Prakriti are not two things, they are part of the same Ardhanarishwara Tattva. Then I would like to take another beautiful section of verses from Uma Sahasram, so which has been penned, which is a masterpiece of mystical poetry, penned by Sri Kavyakanta Vasishta Ganapati Muni, who is a disciple of both Sri Ramana as well as Sri Aurobindo, of course Mahapariva and others. Okay, so Sri Ramana Maharishi gave him the name Kavyakanta. Kavyakanta is the title given to him because of his, his excellence in his mastery of Sanskrit poetry as well as his philosophical rendering. So I think it's a masterpiece. In my humble words, I can't describe it more. Okay. All the worlds are established in the navel of Supreme Purusha called Satyaloka, world of truth. The subtle power that spreads around Satyaloka is called Tapoloka, and the world of tapas. Concealed subject matter emerges from the Supreme Being. Satyaloka and its stream of power spreads around like power of flame spreads associated with smoke and emerges from fire. This is called jñāna loka, plane of bliss. How the Saptalokas, which is extended as a polarity principle into the 14 worlds, is he now Kavyakanta Ganapati now takes each of these lokas and explains them from Dardana Rishwara point of view. Okay, world of bliss, jñāna loka, or the world of bliss, Janaloka, that appears very subtle. Smoke is known as Naka. The supreme power, Parashakti, that is spread within is subtler than that. Power of penance, that is like the radiant pure flame present in smoke, is called Diva by some, and it is called the great sky, Vyoma. Pramakasha by others. Infinite great Janaloka that has come out of smoke is called by different names, such as great and expansive sky, Vyoma, sky between heaven and earth, Antariksha, and celestial sky, Gagana. An inexplicable separate existence, Pritagatama, came out of Paramatma from blazing Shakti in between Janaloka and Tapaloka in association with them, the Sandhi Pranta with egoistic disposition. The path of dazzling light sky is termed as Daksha, symbolically the soul, power Shakti that is inherent in the womb of Daksha is known as Dakshayani. Earlier manifestation of Shakti is known as Sati. She was born again as Dakshayani, who is coexistent with the Lord Ishvara with separate identity. Shakti is the daughter of sky, Daksha. However, in reality, Dakshi has taken a birth from Shakti. Therefore, it is in conformity with the Vedic saying, Daksha is born from Aditi and Aditi is born from Daksha. So we saw earlier a concept in the Vedas where the earlier slide also we talked about how Daksha and Aditi and Daksha, how Daksha projects or emits Dakshi, the Aditi, and how Aditi again swallows or merges and procreates Daksha again. Okay, so this kind of relationship has very deep philosophical concept, of course, both in science and in spirituality. That is what is highlighted here. As I said, this has been given a very vulgar representation or interpretation by some, either by mistake of their understanding of the philosophy, deep philosophy, or by mischief to downgrade the Indian wisdom. But this concept of the seemingly incestuous relationship has a very, 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 very deep philosophical or a metaphysical or a cosmological underpin for that. Shakti is the daughter of sky Daksha. However, in reality, Daksha has taken birth from Shakti. Therefore, it is a conformity with the Vedic saying Daksha is born from Aditi and Aditi is born from Daksha. So, learned people regard Sati and Bhava as mother and father of the world. However, some others differ and regard Aditi as the mother of Devas and Prajapati as the father. The Lord playfully takes the form of the divine man, and Shakti, mother of the universe, takes the form of the divine damsel for her Lord. Okay, so this is again a very important explanation in verses poetic form called Sri Uma Sahasram by the great scholar, yogi, saint, jnani, Sri Kavya Kanta Ganapati, Vasishta Ganapati Muni. Okay, so it answers to all the discussion points and the queries that you would have been having of some of these concepts of the relationship between Purusha and Prakriti. So I think it's a very, very important verse. Okay, so we have been seeing all Sanskrit texts. While Sanskrit is one of the largest and the oldest as well as the widest corpus of Indic wisdom available pan India and even abroad, like in Nepal, Tibet, Sri Lanka, and other Asian countries, wherever Hinduism or Buddhism are spread. Okay. But there are also every native religion or every local religion, local language has its own preferences or its own specialized wisdom. Okay, and they are all unique and special in its own way. And so here we are referring to one of such works in Tamil, which is called as Tirumandiram, which was again a masterpiece, a magnum opus masterpiece of Thirumolar, who condensed about the 18 Shaivagamas, which includes both the Veda and the Veda Vadas of Saiva Siddhanta, into around 3,000 plus verses in pristine Tamil, which is called as which is Thirumolar. So the Thirumolar, when I say it is a condensed version, it doesn't mean it is a copy. It is a original yogic experience. So whether so Thirumolar has its own original way of expressing whatever has been referred in the Vedantas and the Agamanta. So this is again a synthetic text where you see all the concepts of Vedas and the Agamas into it. So here coming specifically to the Sivashakti Tattvam. So here he talks about Shakti is the wide world. Shakti is the universe vast. Shakti Shiva conjoined in the kinetic and potential. Shakti is the formed. Shiva is the formless. Shakti Shiva Tattvas are 6 and 30 true. So what it means is that he also talks about the Shiva Shakti synergies of the polarity, and he also talks about the Shiva Shakti tattvas or manifestation to 36 tattvas. So this is basically an extension of the 24 plus 1, the 25 tattvas of sāṃkhya darśana is now expanded into 36 tattvas and 60 upatattvas, corresponding to 96 total ontological entities in Saiva Siddhanta. That is what is referred here. So the 36 tattvas are an expansion or an extension of the 24 plus 1, 25 tattvas of sāṃkhya darśana. Okay, we will deep dive when we get into Saiva Siddhanta there. But what he is highlighting is the correspondence between Shiva and Shakti, between Purusha and Prakriti here. Okay. The second verse talks about formless is the tattva primal. Formed it is the world. So formless is the tattva primal, which is the transcendent principle. Formed is the immanent, it is the world, animate and inanimate. A source of pleasure, then indeed it is. Tattva is all pervasive. Sadashiva is tattva, truth, real. Okay, so this is again Saiva Siddhanta interpretation of the concept of the Sāṅkhya Tattva and its extension of it from an ontological perspective. So now let's now get into Sri Bhagavata Mahapurana, which is again one of the most popular and even today chanted, recited, contemplated Puranas among the 18 Mahapuranas because of its richness in bhakti. Okay, so here what is highlighted in the Srimad Bhagavata Mahapurana, particularly the Kapilopadesha. So this is a very important point. We talked about the different scriptures of Sāṅkhya Granthas, the Sāṅkhya Prakarana Granthas, while there are specific manuscripts or the specific scriptures, the Prakarana Granthas of Sāṅkhya, like Sāṅkhya Karika, Sāṅkhya Sutra, etc. Sāṅkhya philosophy is also spread across in the Mahabharata, in the Puranas like the Bhagavata Purana and the Padma Purana, in various Puranas, including Shiva Purana, etc. And it is also spread. It is also spread in the other treatises of Saivam, Saktam, etc. So here we are looking at the Kapilopadesha, so which is part of Srimad Bhagavata Mahapurana, wherein there is a dialogue or knowledge exchange between Kapila Maharishi and his mother. So where Devahuti, his mother, said, "O Supreme Personality of Godhead, kindly explain the characteristics of the Supreme Person and his energies, for both of these are the cause of this manifest and unmanifest creation." The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, so the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, the unmanifested eternal combination of the three modes or the three gunas is the cause of the manifest state and is called pradhana. So the pradhana is the primary manifested state. It is called prakriti when it is manifested stage of existence. So pradhana is a moola prakriti, the pre-creatrix, and its created principle or is the prakriti. Okay. See, Bhakti Vedanta Prabhupada in his commentary on the above explains this. The Lord points out material nature in its subtle stage, which is called pradhana, and he analyzes this pradhana. The explanation of pradhana and prakriti is that pradhana is the subtle, undifferentiated sum total of all material elements. Although they are all undifferentiated, one can understand that the total material elements are contained therein. When the total material elements are manifested by the interaction of the three modes of material nature, the manifestation is called prakriti. Impersonalists say that Brahman is without variegatedness and without differentiation. One may say that pradhana is the Brahman stage, but may argue that the Mahat Tattva is also different from Pradhana because in the Mahat Tattva there are manifestations. The actual explanation of Pradhana, however, is given here. When the cause and effect are not clearly manifested, avyakta, the reaction of the total element does not take place. And that stage of material nature is called Pradhana. Pradhana is not the time element because in the time element there are actions and reactions, creation and annihilation. Nor is it the jiva or marginal potency of living entities or designated conditioned living entities, because the designation of the living entities are not eternal. One adjective used in this connection is nitya, which indicates eternality. Therefore, the condition of material nature immediately previous to its manifestation is called pradhana. So this is the ISKCON's way of interpreting the Srimad Bhagavatam. Of course, there is Advaitic, Dvaitic, and Vishishtadvaitic interpretations of the same Srimad Bhagavatam verses. Here I have quoted what Prabhupada talks about ISKCON, which is actually a derivative of the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's version of Advaita. Um, So again, going back to Sri Aurobindo, the life divine, on the topic of the incarnate word, he continues: the conscious being Purusha is the self as originator, witness, support, and lord and enjoyer of the forms and works of nature. As the aspect of self is in its essential character transcendental, even when involved and identified with the universal and individual becoming, so the Purusha aspect is characteristically universal, individual, and intimately connected with nature, even when separated from her. For this conscious spirit, while retaining its impersonality and eternity, its universality puts on at the same time a more personal aspect. It is the impersonal personal being in nature from whom it is not altogether detached, for it is always coupled with her. Nature acts for her the Purusha, and by its sanction for its will and pleasure. The conscious being imports its consciousness to the energy we call nature, receives in that consciousness her workings, as in the mirror accepts the forms which she, the executive cosmic force, creates and imposes on it, gives or withdraws its sanction from our moments. The experience of Purusha Prakriti, the spirit or the conscious being in its relation to nature, is of immense pragmatic importance, for on these relations the whole play of consciousness depends in the embodied being. If the Purusha in us is passive and allows nature to act, accepting all she imposes on him, giving a constant automatic sanction, then the soul in mind, life, body, the mental, the vital, the physical being in us becomes subject to our nature, ruled by its formation, driven by its activities. Then is the normal state of our ignorance. If the Purusha in us becomes aware of itself as the witness and stands back from nature, that is the first step to the soul's freedom. For it becomes detached, and it is possible then to know nature and her processes, and in all independence, since we no longer involved in her works, to accept or not to accept, to make the sanction no longer automatic but free and effective. We can choose what we shall do or not do in us, or we can stand back altogether from our works and withdraw easily into the self-spiritual silence, or we can reject our present formations and rise to spiritual level of existence, and from there recreate our existence. The Purusha can cease to be subject, Amsha, and become Lord of its nature, Ishvara. So how a Jivatma can transcend itself to the state of Paramatma in an Advaitic transcendence is what is highlighted. So the again boiling down to the empirical to the transcendental, what to say, evolution or the spiritual progress is what is highlighted here in the life divine by Sri Aurobindo. So we saw his prose work, Life Divine. We saw two extracts on the related topic. Now we will look at from Savitri, okay, which is the magnum opus masterpiece on the episode which occurs between Satyavan and Savitri in the Mahabharata, originally in the Mahabharata. But the Mahabharata references is much smaller in terms of volume and its philosophization or spiritualization compared to what Sri Aurobindo has done in his English kavya or English epic. Okay, So, this is one of the longest English epics, as far as I know, um, where it is embedded with highest level of philosophical or spiritual content. Okay, so reading the verses here, the master of being has come close to her, an immortal child born in the fugitive years. In objects wrong wrought in the person she conceives, dreaming she clashes her idea of him, and catches her a look and there a jest. Ever he repeats in them his ceaseless births. He is the maker and the world he made. He is the vision and he is the seer. He is himself the actor and the act. He is himself the knower and the known. He is himself the dreamer and the dream. There are two who are one and play in many worlds. In knowledge and ignorance, they have spoken and met. All light and darkness are their eyes. Interchange. Our pleasure and pain are their wrestle and embrace. Our deeds and our hopes are intimate to their tale. They are married secretly in our thought and life. The universe is an endless muscadet, for nothing here is utterly what it seems. It is a dream, fact, vision of a truth, which but for the dream would not be wholly true. A phenomena stands out significant against the dim backgrounds of eternity. We accept its face and pass by all its means. A part is seen, we take it for the whole. Thus have they made their play with thus for roles. Author and actor with himself as seen. He moves there as a soul, as nature she. So very beautiful verses, very, very in-depth philosophically. And MP Pandit in his lectures on Savitri, MP Pandit is again a great scholar, and he is a disciple of Sri Aurobindo and the mother. He explains these verses thus. She dreams. In her dreams, she pursues her idea. So she is Savitri here. She dreams. In her dreams, she pursues her idea of him, her conception of what he is, in the form of the objects fashioned by her, in the patterns ideated by her, and in the process she manages to catch her a look, there a gesture of his. That is all she can catch, because he hides himself in the objects wrought by her and in the persons conceived by her. He repeats his ceaseless births. He is born in them again and again. This world is made by him. He is its maker. But on that account, he is not separate from the world. He is this world itself. He creates the world, and in creating it, performed and the performer. He is this world and itself. He creates the world, and in creating it, he becomes the world. He sees the vision of the creation, but what he sees is also himself, not something separate and objective. This is again a very, very important point of integral Advaita of Sri Aurobindo, where the concepts of Abhasavada, or the concept of appearance, or the Avichedavada, the concept of constraining, or the Pratibhimbavada, the concept of reflection, or all says that whether it is the seeming reflection, or the seeming appearance, or the seeming contraction of Brahman into the phenomenal world or the empirical world is nothing but by the Swatantra Shakti of Brahman. It is a self-concealing, a self-appearing, or a self-reflecting principle. So this is what the integral Advaita of Sri Aurobindo talks about. He is seen as the vision of the creation, but what he sees is also himself, nothing separate and objective. The act which is performed and the performer of the act are both the same in his case. The object of knowledge and the knower who knows are the same. He dreams, but the dream is he himself. All is he. There have to be two, but actually they are one. The one polarizes itself for the purposes of the play. The manifestation, the Parashiva, the absolute reality, forms itself into Shiva and Shakti. It is the one Parashiva foisting itself as Shiva and as Shakti. and they play together not only in this world but in the other worlds too. For there are as many as 7 planes of existence, which the Kavya Kanda Ganapati explains, right? The Saptalokas, planes of existence, and many worlds on each plane. So there are lokas and there are also bhuvanas. They both meet and commune, converse with each other, not only with the knowledge but also in the field of ignorance. Even contraries like light and darkness are kind of interchange between their eyes. What we helplessly involved in the play experience, all our pains and pleasures, are their wrestles and embrace. Both are forms of their plays with each other. They are enacting a story, and that of the plot, our little deeds and hopes are the ingredients. In our living, they are joined together, the Shakti and the Shiva. They are conjointly active in our thinking and in our living. They are, as it were, they are ingredients in, they are as it were secretly wedded to each other. The purpose of our life is to bring it into the open by harmonizing in our life both the static and the dynamic elements, Shiva and Shakti. To reconcile the concentrates in our life is to seal their secret union, the union of truths that are behind the apparent contraries. Masquerade is a French word. It is a term for a masked ball, a dance, where the participants put on the masks so that nobody knows who is who. The whole idea of personality, the persona itself is from etymologically speaking, is a mask that a man wears on a stage. So when I say this is my personality, it is what I mask myself as. It adds to the zest of the game when the parties are not known. This universe is such a place where nobody really knows what is what. Nothing here is what it seems. Kindly note that there are 3 concepts here. There is a vision of truth, but that vision is partly in the form of dream and partly in fact, and partly fact. Both the dreams and the fact constitute the vision. If the vision were to be confined only to factual state, well, half the truth would be missed. The dream element gives the idealistic content, the possible evolution of the things which are not yet. Only facts will be too prosaic. But the dream waves endless possibilities and makes it fascinating. What is real, what is permanent is eternity. Against that background, all this is a phenomenon that has raised its head in terms of time and space. Now, of this whole phenomena of the world, we know only its appearance. We see a surface and say, yes, we know it, and we pass by missing the real meaning. Either our sight is not deep enough, or we are so perfunctory in our movement that that we do not take pains to know the truth of things. We rarely go behind the surface. We see things in segments and we take each part for the whole. We forget that it is only a part and the full meaning of the part can be understood only in the context of the whole. That is the defect of our knowledge. They refers to the he and the she, the Purusha and the Prakriti. All this is the play with us as little actors. Each one of us is given a role and a play, and the huge drama goes on. And of this play, he is the author. He, the author, is also the actor, playing all the roles through different individuals. Though we arrogate to ourselves, this is self-arrogation, the Hangara Tattva, roles of independent actors, the real one acts in us is he, the Antaryami Brahmana. The whole scene is also his own being. All takes place in his vastitude. In the cosmic play, he moves the soul and she as nature. So this is a very, very, very important explanation by MP Pandit as a lecture on Savitri, on the verses of the Savitri quoted here. Okay, this again explains the whole philosophy that we were talking about. Okay, this also talks about the importance of imagination, the importance of play, the importance of art, of how both are required, both fact and fiction are required both. That's why we have mythology, we have mystic experiences of different bhavanas, seeing God as father, seeing God as friend, seeing God as enemy, seeing God as son, seeing God as a guru, etc. Right? So all these bhavanas, all these are staged as part of mystic experiences, and the dancer and the dance, which is very beautifully expressed in the Nataraja Tattva, in the stage of Sidambaram. Chitta Akasha, or Sidambaram is the stage of Chitta Akasha, the field of cosmic experience, where the dancer and the dance perform their art. So the dancer is the Purusha Tattva, and the dance is the Prakriti Tattva. So the dancer dancing is the Ardhanarishvi form of the Purusha Prakriti symbiosis, synergy. So we will discuss when we get into the Nataraja Tattva later. Of course, I have my blogs written on that. You can take a look there. Okay, so we have seen the Mahabharata Shanti Parva version. So now we will go to the Vaishnava concept. So far we have seen the Shiva Shakti aspects. Okay, then we are getting into the Pancharatra Agama, which is one of the main agamas. So Vaikanasa and Pancharatra, the two main corpus of agamas in the Vaishnava Sampradaya. I mean, though they are categorized as two, each of them have their own huge upagamas or sub agamas as part of them. Okay. So the Pancharatra Agama, for example, Lakshmi Tantra is a specific branch of the Pancharatra Agama, where the goddess Lakshmi, who is the polarity principle of Mahavishnu, is glorified here. Okay, so here the Lakshmi Tantra declares that since in the state Brahman is not differentiated from Shakti, it is said to be non-dual Advaita. Okay, so this is again a very important synergy. Lakshmi Tantra Pancharatra Agama is highly glorified in Sri Vaishnava Sampradayam, which is based on Vishishtadvaita darśana. But here it also talks about the Advaitic concept here. So truth is one. They are expressed in multiple ways. Okay, so since in this state Brahman is not differentiated from Shakti, so the Abhedavada of Shiva and Shakti are Brahman and Shakti, it is said to be non-dual Advaita. Its supreme power, like the rays of the moon, is myself the goddess. So here it is talking from the Shakti perspective or the Lakshmi perspective or the Prakriti perspective. The Prakriti perspective says that Shiva is nothing but me. Okay, just as Shiva says Shakti is nothing but me. So Shivagami itself means that Shiva is the lover of, Shiva, Shakti is the lover, the Shivagami, the Kami of Shiva, the lover of Shiva. She is also the Hridaya Sthala of Shiva. So that means she is in the heart of Shiva. So who is in the heart of Shiva? So Shivagami and Nataraja, the dancer and the dance concept, right? So this is what the Lakshmi Tattva, the Lakshmi Tantra also says. Okay. So it is said to be a non-dual. Its supreme power, like the rays of the moon, is myself of the goddess, the immortal one, who identify all states of being with her own self, Brahman's I-hood. So the Aham and the Idam aspect of is what is identified, and their synergies are explained. Hari, being I, the self, is regarded as the self in all beings. I am the eternal I-hood of all living beings. I am considered to be the eternal Vasudeva, the state of existence. Brahman embraces the principle of existence and its state of existence. Hence it is Brahman, is the eternal state that when they differentiated, the existing principle is God Narayana, and its state of existence is the supreme Lakshmi, that is myself. Therefore, Brahman, the eternal, is called Lakshmi Narayana, because the I entity is always inherent in I-hood. So this is again a very, very, very important set of verses from the Pancharatra Agama, the Lakshmi Tantra. Okay, so there's a vritti or a commentary on the Pancharatra Agama, which states thus. Of course, I have a Chennai translation of that. Brahman non-duality, Brahmadvaita, because it is qualified, Vishishta, by its own inseparably established apratak siddhi, apratak siddha. So this is a very, 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 very important concept in Sri Vaishnavism or Vishishtadvaita, the apratak siddha. The power, Shakti and I-ness, Ahanta, the Brahman, so qualified is alone the one reality, Tattva, that is the meaning. By way of an illustration, Drishtanta, he states only this, that its own essential nature, Svarupa, is itself inseparably established, Apratak Siddha, with that saying itself, I am moonlight, by the phrase, non-departing, Anapayini, in all states, avastha, the great sage statement is recalled in Raghavahood, Sita, in Raghavahood, that is in Rama, Sita came to be Rukmini as Krishna's birth. In other descents, Avatara too, she is Vishnu's non-departing Anapayini consort. Only the supreme Brahman qualified Vishishta by Sri is meant, not however the Sriless Nirshika. This is the meaning. Even though for both Lakshmi and Narayana there is a status of being the principal Sheshin, with respect to the self-oblation, Atma Havis, nevertheless, as in the Agni rite and in the Vaishnava rite and the like, because only the qualified Vishishta all is the intended object, Uddesha, and because that is one, Ekatva, there is entailment, prasanga of a duality of principle, Sheshadvita, Vita. This is the purport. So this is the Lakshmi Tantra Vritti on the above quoted verses from Lakshmi Tantra as part of the Pancharatra Agama. So here Lakshmi and Narayana are the non-dual singularity having their own individual polarities. Again, the Pancharatra Agama, another branch of Pancharatra Agama is the Paramasamhita. The Paramasamhita states that Brahma, what is the form of that Prakriti and in what manner does she bring things into existence? What is the connection between her and the Supreme Purusha? Parama. The form of Prakriti is described as unanimated, immeasurable, eternal, always changing, as possessed of the three qualities and as providing body for those who act. So this is the essential Prakriti Tattva Lakshana we talked about. As sound pervades all this Akasha, so in the same manner the Supreme Soul, Paramatma, pervades all Prakriti. This also we have discussed in length. Okay, so the whole concept of Atma, the whole concept of Purusha, right from its etymology, means this pervasion. As vicissitude in milk, as taste in water, so in the process of transformation, these two attain to the position of the pervaded and the pervader. In this condition, that which is the pervading agent is the supreme woman or Vishayi, while the unformed Prakriti, Avyakritam, becomes the object of pervasion, that is the Vishaya, and thus inferior. Since Sat and Asat cannot be separated one from the other and seen apart, in the same manner, the pervader cannot be regarded as distinct from the pervaded. Hence, Purusha is regarded as the pervader of all. In the Avyakritam, Prakriti is Achit, inanimate. Chit, the active principle, is held to be superior. The two combined is different from either and exist as if they were one. So that both the Beda and the Abeda and the Beda aspects is highlighted here. Where they are one, they are also different. They have their own special qualities and their special functionalities is what is highlighted here. Okay, this is a highly Advaitic in its nature, which is also means that it is Vishishtadvaitic way, because it provides Vishishtadvaitam is the qualified non-dualism. So Kevaladvaita is absolute non-dualism. Vishishtadvaita is the qualified non-dualism. Both are forms of Advaita, non-dualism. Both talk about some level of non-dualism here. So the important concept has been visually captured here. So this is a very important Saiva visual, particularly in the Shakta Marga, where Shiva or Purusha is like the Shava, is like the dead corpse on which the divine dance of Shakti happens. So the Shiva is the Ambara, the stage, the Chidambara, the conscious, the Prakasha Tattva, and Kali, the dancing Kali, the vibrantly dancing, the ferociously dancing Kali is the Prakriti Tattva. Okay, so the in Natya Shastra of Bharata Muni, the Bharatanatyam Shastra, there's some Shiva performs what in Chidambaram what is called as Ananda Tandava. So that's a beautifully coined word where Ananda means bliss and Tandava is the dance of terror or ferocious dance. So the dance of anger and there is a blissful. So Ananda and Tandava are mixed together. So here Shiva is blissfully sleeping. So he is enjoying the bliss. Okay, so he is at rest. So he is in the state of Shanti, Paramashanti. While Shakti is performing the act on Shiva. So superimposed on Shiva. Okay, Shiva and Kali, Brahman and Shakti are one and not two, who are separable. Force inherent in existence may be at rest or it may be in motion, but when it is at rest, it exists nonetheless and is not abolished, diminished, or in any way essentially altered. So this is again Life Divine by Sri Aurobindo. So we saw Devi Bhagavatam, we saw Agama Shastras, so we saw Lakshmi, Sri Vaishnava, Pancharatra Agama, we saw Saiva corpuses, we saw Vedantic corpuses, we saw right from Rig Veda. All these establish the essential polarity of the wedlock, of the unbound wedlock. So now you understand why it is called as unbound wedlock. There is wedlock, but it is still unbound. Once again, quoting Sri Aurobindo's Life Divine, movement of force being admitted as the whole nature of cosmos, two questions arise. And first, how did this movement come to take place at all in the bosom of existence? If we suppose it to be not only eternal, but the very essence of all existence, the question does not arise. But we have negatived this theory. We are aware of an existence which is not compelled by the movement. How then does this movement alien to its eternal repose come to take place in it? By what cause? By what possibility? By what mysterious impulsion? This is a very, 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 very important, deep-driven metaphysical question that is being debated, discussed for more than 2000 years in world philosophy. So this is what is highlighted by Aurobindo here. The answer most approved by the ancient Indian mind was that force is inherent in existence. So Shakti, so and omnipresence, which is existence, is tightly integrated with omnipotence, which is force. Shiva and Kali, Brahman and Shakti are one and not two, who are separable. Force inherent in existence may be at rest or it may be in motion. But when it is at rest, it exists nonetheless and is not abolished, diminished, or in any way essentially altered. This reply is so entirely rational and in accordance with the nature of things that we need not hesitate to accept it. For it is impossible, because contradictory to reason, to suppose that force is a thing alien to the one and infinite existence and entered into it from outside or was non-existent and arose in it in some point in time. So it is, he says, I mean, there is a school of interpretation of Kevaladvaita. I will call it as interpretation of Kevaladvaita. I highlight the word interpretation here, where it says that there cannot be any activity for Brahman. Okay, so the Parabrahman or the Nirguna Brahman. So all activity is Maya or illusion. Okay, but the other schools of Advaita, like the Trika Advaita, the Parama Advaita, or sometimes called as a Paradvaita of Kashmir Saivism, or the other schools of Vedanta schools itself, like the Shivadvait, the Nimbarkar schools, or the Pushtimarga school. All these schools recognize the reality of both the being and the becoming. Using the words of Western philosophy, the being and the becoming, the existence, omnipresence, and omnipotence. So the action is as part the Swatantra Shakti, which is what Kashmir Saivism talks about, is the will of God, the Sangalpa of God. So, so this is what is highlighted here. The answer most approved by the ancient Indian mind was the forces inherent in existence. Okay, Shiva and Kali, Brahman and Shakti are one and not two, who are separable. So this is what also the Shakti aspect of Maya, Mula Maya Vada within Advaita also highlights that Maya is a Shakti. So of course, some of the advocates of Advaita don't buy that idea, but at least I strongly feel that it's synergized with the concept of Shiva Shakti or the Lakshmi Narayana, or the yin and yang aspects of duality, of where omnipotence and omnipresence are always two sides of the same coin. Force inherent in existence may be rest or it may be in motion, but when it is at rest, it exists. So this is what energy and matter also, right? So matter is passive energy, it is potential energy, and when it becomes energy, expressed energy, it becomes manifest energy, right? So that is what is highlighted here. But when it is at rest, it exists nonetheless, as it is not abolished, diminished, or in any way essentially altered. This reply is so entirely rational and in accordance with the nature of things that we need not hesitate to accept it, for it is impossible, because contradictory to reason, to suppose that force is a thing alien to one and infinite existence and enter into it from outside. So action cannot come from outside, or was non-existent and arose in it at some point in time. Even the illusionist theory must admit that Maya, the power of self-illusion in Brahman, is potentially eternal in eternal being, and then the sole question in its manifestation or non-manifestation. The Sāṃkhya also asserts the eternal coexistence of Prakriti and Purusha, nature and conscious soul, and the alternative states of rest or equilibrium of Prakriti, and movement or disturbance and equilibrium. So finally, he stitches with the Sāṃkhya philosophy of how this coexistence of Purusha and Prakriti are also core to the Sāṃkhya philosophy. Again, jumping to Lakshmi Tantra, the identity is always recognized as a wood, for the one cannot exist without the other, and each is invariably linked to the other. Realize that the relationship between the Lord is that of identity, because without Highwood, this is the same thing. I mean, sorry, I'm repeating that. And then we get to Srimad Bhagavatam, where, see Devi Bhagavatam, where it is said that she is eternal, she, as the fire and its burning power are not different, so there is no separate distinction between them. So Saiva Mata, Vaishnava Mata, Shakta Mata, all three endorse this. So this is Devi Bhagavatam, where Shakti is glorified. In Lakshmi Tantra also we saw that. Okay, she is eternal, as the fire and its burning power are not different. So there is no separate distinction between Atman and his Shakti, between Purusha and Prakriti. Therefore, those that are foremost and the highest of the yogis do not recognize any difference between a male and a female. All is Brahman. He is everywhere as male and female forever. There is nothing in this world that can exist for a moment even without this Brahman consisting of male and female. That is, they are Brahman with Maya manifested. Okay, this is what Srimad Devi Bhagavata Mahapurana says. Moving on, we come to a very important analogy provided in Sāṃkhya Karika, which is one of the Mula Granthas prakarana granthas of Sāṃkhya. So here all along we were seeing the different references from the Puranas, the Agamas, the Upanishads, and from contemporary saints and etc. We now get into the Sāṃkhya Karika itself, where it says, and from that contrast, it follows that the spirit is witness and has isolation, neutrality, and is the seer and inactive. Thus, from thus union, the insentient evolution appears as if sentient, and similarly, from the activity really belonging to the attributes, the spirit, which is neutral, appears as if it were active. For the perception of nature by the spirit and for the isolation of the spirit, there is a union of both, like that of halt and the blind, and from the union proceeds evolution. So this is a very, very, very important analogy that one can easily relate to explaining the relationship between Purusha and the Prakriti. Okay, so there is the blind matter principle, which is the Prakriti. The Prakriti Tattva is considered to be Andha. See the image on the left. Okay, and there is the Panga. So who is the lame spirit? According to classical Sāṃkhya, Purusha doesn't perform, it doesn't act, it is just conscious, it is aware. That consciousness is what is identified as that it can see. Okay, but there is Prakriti which can actually act. Here act is represented as the concept of walking or the motion. Okay, so how they both support each other is what is identified here. So the Purusha directs, because the Purusha can see, it is conscious, it can see, it directs the way to Prakriti. Okay, so it sits on Prakriti, and Prakriti does the actual activity of walking. Okay, so Prakriti is blind, but it is directed by Purusha. So this helping each other is what is very beautifully highlighted in Sāṃkhya Karika here by Sri Ishwar Krishnacharya. Okay, and Sri Gaudapadacharya, who is the he is one of the founding fathers of the Kevala Advaita darśana. So he is the guru of Govindapada, who is the guru of Adi Shankaracharya. So he is also considered to be an avadara of Patanjali, who is again an avadara of the, sorry. The Sāṃkhya Karika Gaudapada Bhashya talks thus. The union of spirit with the nature is for its contemplation. The spirit contemplates the nature, that is its effects, beginning from Mahat and ending with gross elements. For this reason, the union of the nature also with the spirit is for the liberation. And this union of both the nature and the spirit should be regarded to be like that of a lame man with a blind man. Just as a man is lame and the other is blind, these two, while on a journey and proceeding with a great difficulty, were deserted by their friends when all of them were attracted by the robbers and by course of luck wandered here and there in the forest. By their own movement, they met each other, came into union. Now this union of theirs, on account of each relying on the words of the other, results for the purpose of going and seeing. The blind man placed the lame man on his shoulders. Thus, the blind man goes along the road shown by the lame man placed on his body, and also the lame man also he on the blind man's shoulder. In a like manner, in the spirit there is the power to see, but no action, and in the nature, as in the blind man, there is the power to act, but no power to contemplate. Again, just as these two, the blind and the lame man, will separate from each other when their purpose is served, when they have reached their desired destination. In this manner, the nature will cease to act after having secured the liberation of the spirit, and the spirit also will reach salvation and abstraction after contemplating the nature. There will be the separation of the two when they have gained their object. Further, the creation is a result of that krita, means brought about by that union. Just as from the union of a man and a woman a son is born, so from the union of nature and the spirit is the creation produced. So this is Gaudapadacharya's bhashya on the Sāṃkhya Karika. So we saw that Gaudapadacharya is considered as an avatara of Patanjali Maharishi, and Patanjali is again considered an incarnation of Sri Adishesha, on which Mahavishnu is resting. So this is the mythological flow, and Gaudapada is the founding fathers of Kevala Dvaita Vedanta Darshana in formalizing it through his famous Karika on Mandukya Upanishad. Okay, so this is how Gaudapadacharya, who belongs to the Kevala Dvaita Darshana Parambara, or who initiated the comments on the Sāṃkhya Karika, which is part of the Sāṃkhya Darshana. Okay, so this kind of healthy exchange of ideas has always been there in Indian philosophy. We saw already Vachasmati Mishra, we saw Vijnana Bhikshu, all writing commentaries across all the darshanas. Okay. Interestingly, the Ishvara Krishna was not the first one to employ the blind lame axiom that we talked about as philosophical spiritual symbolism. One can trace back some indirect forms of such employments even in the core Vedic corpus itself, Veda Samhitas, more specifically in the Rigveda Samhita, which is one of the oldest recorded religious scripture in the world. So we have examples of the various Vedic Samhita mantras like 2.13.12, 2.50, 15.7, etc., where Sri Grihat Samada Saunaka Maharishi, to whom it was revealed, right, and whose Adhikara Devata, to whom it was glorified, is what is tabulated here. You can, I don't have time to go to each of these, but these are all references of a similar concept of the blind man and the lame man synergies, which is referenced by Ishvara Krishna and expanded by Gaudapada in the above slides. Typically, in most of the narratives in these Vedic hymns, it is the respective Adhikara, the presiding deity of the hymn, Indra, Soma, as we saw above, Ashwin, etc., is one who helps either the lame person, okay, the pangu, the halt person or the lame person, and the andavad, blind person, as the case may be, unlike in the case of the blind person employed in the Sāṃkhya philosophy, wherein it is more of a mutual help between the two handicapped persons. So there's a slight difference in these analogies. So in the Vedic examples, it is the main gods, deities, the Indra, Soma, etc., who helps either as a pangu or who is the lame person, okay, as the case may be, unlike in the case of other where there's a mutual handicap is identified. Even the seeming contradiction or difference can be reconciled if we take a deeper spiritual insight into the analogy underlying the Shruti Vachana, the Vedic utterances, which would be in line with the Sheshwara Sāṃkhya Darshana, theistic declarative philosophy, rather than the Nirishwara Sāṃkhya Darshana, the atheistic declarative philosophy highlighted in the above quoted Sāṃkhya Karika. So please remember that Sāṃkhya Karika technically belongs to the theistic branch of Sāṃkhya, which is called as a Nirishvara Sāṃkhya darśana, while there is a theistic version, which is a Sheshvara Sāṃkhya darśana. We saw that as part of the Kapilopadesha within the Srimad Bhagavatam and other places. Okay, so what is highlighted here is that the theistic aspect is highlighted in reconciling the differences between the Sāṃkhya version of these lame and blind man example and what is given in the Vedas. We will deep dive into what is the Sheshvara Sāṃkhya versus the Nirishvara Sāṃkhya in the subsequent session. I originally thought of doing it now, but it becomes very elaborate to talk in the same session. Okay. Okay. So, in other words, while the Pangu Purusha Tattva, the lame spirit principle, and the Prakriti Tattva, blind matter principle, corresponds to the materialized objective thisness principle and the personalized subjective principle respectively, whereas the Adhikara Devata corresponds to the Adhidevika spiritualized holistic principle. So when we get into the Ishvara Sāṃkhya darśana, we will expand this concept more. Moreover, esoterically speaking, even these Vedic deities, Indra, Soma, and Ashwin, etc., are not necessarily Bhāhya Devata, external deities. Rather, they are Abhyantara Deva Shaktaha, internal divine energies, technically called as the Antaryami brain dweller. So again, this is again talking about these gods are not outside whatever is referred in the Vedic mantras quoted above or cited above. I have not quoted them, I have cited them. Okay. They are all part of the inherent Antaryami Bhavana. Okay. So the blind matter principle corresponds to the materialized subjective thisness principle. The Pangu or the Purusha Tattva, the lame spirit principle, correspond to the person's subjective I amness principle. And the Adhikara Devata, presiding deity, Indra, Soma, and Ashwin, correspond to the Adhidevika Sakalya Ishvara, spiritualized or holistic divine principle. So, how from atheistic concept referred in Sāṃkhya Karika to a theistic interpretation, we can expand our knowledge, is what is highlighted in this slide. So with this, I am concluding the concept of the wedlock. I will call it as an unbound wedlock. Okay. And I think by now you must appreciate why it is justified in calling the term as unbound wedlock. Okay, with this I will conclude today's session. I actually wanted to cover the other session also, but I think this itself is short beyond time. So we will look at the next topics of seer-seen relationship, the drishta sambandha, which is again very important concept, not only in Sāṃkhya darśana but also in Advaita, where we have Drishti Srishtivada, we have Srishti Drishtivada, etc. And it is also very important in Western philosophy of and the anthropic principles of Western philosophy, where and the panpsychism principles, etc., where the observation or the seeing plays an important role, and of course in quantum physics, where the role of the observer plays a very important role. So here we will focus starting with the Sāṃkhya aspect of it, and we will, as we evolve into other darshanas, we'll also compare it with the Advaita schools and the modern Western philosophy, as well as the medieval Western philosophies, as well as the modern scientific interpretations on the observer seer-seen relationship. or the observer and the participative uh, mm, concepts as part of the omnijective universe of what David Bohm calls. Okay, so thanks for the patient listening. Hope this session was useful. I end the session here. Hari Om. Again, thanks for your patient listening. I hope this benefits you. And again, a small request, please subscribe to the video and do like it and share your critical feedback, so that it helps, it motivates me to provide more content, because I understand that it reaches audience and has some impact, at least an iota of impact, in an outreach as part of the Indian knowledge system. So I have taken considerable effort in consolidating and presenting this content. Hope it has its reach. Okay. Thanks again. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Om Shanti. Om Shanti. I end the session. We look forward for the next session. Thank you. Hari Om.